Welcome back to Talking Sports with Brandon. This is the Week 9 recap video, and it was a really good week, personally, and we'll get into that with the 5 picks. But it was also just a good week of football. A lot of more things happened that can kind of you can see into the future for some teams. You kind of know what their future is going to look like based off this week in particular for a couple teams, and even teams that won, you can kind of tell what their future is. So it was kind of just a week where you could just see which teams can be separated from the top to the not even like maybe borderline playoff teams, but probably missing the playoffs. And these are teams that we expected to make the playoffs. We at least expected to be competitive, if anything, they're just not right now at all. And there's a couple of teams for sure that I definitely want to talk about, and even some possible injury stuff that may have happened in Week 9. There was one injury which I know the news of. We have found that out. I am recording this on Wednesday, so it's been a couple days since Sunday, but it still, I think, is something that is definitely something you have to look forward to and something you definitely have to check up on, and just monitor, because it's a situation that could definitely change the outcome of who wins the 2022-2023 NFL season. So we'll get into that after. We'll start with the 5 picks. I'm definitely happy because this is the first week. This is the first week we've gone over like 500. And I think I know the first week I went over 500. I think since then, that may be the first time I've gone over 500 since then. So it's a huge week. And I felt confident. I know I always say I felt confident about each week, but this one I really did feel confident in. And there definitely wasn't a lot of games to choose from. And I know I said that there were 6 teams on byes, and so it kind of limits the playing field. Some of the matchups weren't great, but I just felt good about it because I thought I picked teams that it's like that team should beat that team. That team should play better than the other team. They're more talented than that team. So I guess one of those instances was maybe not true, but I thought that it definitely. I'll get into it when I talk about that certain game, but it's the history kind of made sense as to why that game would be a close game, and it was. But we'll start with pick number 1. I picked Colts at Pats minus 4.5. This one was easy. Matt Ryan wasn't starting. It was Sam Ellinger. Jonathan Taylor wasn't playing. The Colts they've had no offense. The Pats, they still have a pretty good defense at home. I said Ellinger, this was basically this was his first start in the NFL, basically the first time he's ever really played in the NFL. So that works perfectly into the hands of a guy like Belichick for what a defense can do. And that defense was dominant. They had 9 sacks. I think they had a touchdown on special teams. I think they even had a pick as well, a fumble recovery, I think, too. So it just was domination. It wasn't even close. Final score in that game was 26-3. It was never close. It was just a matter of if the Pats could score, which they did, and it helped that the defense obviously got a touchdown. But it really was never close in this game, and that's what I thought it was going to be. As long as the defense just did what it was supposed to do, as long as the offense scored more than 16 points, it was going to be an easy cover, and it was. So that one was a good way to start. That's the one I looked at, and it just made sense. And the one thing to take away from that game isn't even from the Patriots side. They're 5-4, which is good, but the Colts, they fired Frank Reich, which was on Monday. So the day after the game, they fired him. And I'll just say this: I think Frank Reich's a good coach. I don't think he's a terrible coach. Now, obviously, I'm not an Indy fan, so I don't hear the media every single day. Kind of know more about the teams. Obviously, when you're a fan of that team, you live in that city. You know more about the team than someone else would, even if they're a big fan. So I can't say I know all the details about how he really coached and how he really was in game, but he's definitely a good coach, and he just never had a quarterback. When he gets there, he has Andrew Luck, and then he retires. So you lose this franchise-type quarterback, definitely franchise quarterback, who definitely dealt with injuries, but the team was starting to get better. The offensive line was starting to get put in place. The defense was really picking up. So, the pieces were definitely being put in to fill around Andrew Luck, which was all they needed in those years that they had him. And they finally were getting to that spot, and then he retired. So then you went to Brissett and Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan. So it was every single year you're changing quarterbacks. They're not the most talented quarterbacks anyways. Even though Phillip Rivers, they did make the playoffs that year and they were pretty good. You knew that it was going to be tough for them to really advance in the playoffs that year. So I just don't think he got the fairest shot, especially with those quarterbacks. So I think he'll find a place somewhere else. He'll probably be a quarterbacks coach, OC somewhere, and he'll definitely get a head coaching job at some point in the future. Because I think if you give him a quarterback, he's going to be good because you can see what he can do with quarterbacks. I mean, just getting the what he did out of those guys that I just listed, they were still rather just under 500 or over 500 with every single one of those guys. And think about it, none of those guys are great quarterbacks. So that it's unfortunate that he did get fired. I mean, they're 3-5-1. I guess you can maybe see how it makes sense. It's just it's kind of been stalled the last couple of years, not really going anywhere, especially without that franchise type quarterback, and a change was just necessary. I mean, Irsay, their owner, is definitely a very demonstrative guy. He definitely likes to kind of do things on his own and kind of see the plan his way. But I think the hiring choice for the interim is a little strange. It was Jeff Saturday, who, of course, was a a Hall of Fame player for the Colts, but he's only coached in high school. It was high school football a couple years ago. He's been on, he does ESPN, he does analysis and everything like that. So he definitely, obviously, he knows football. He was a center, and he was one of the smartest guys to play. I think he even led the players union too. So he's smart in that way as well. So he definitely knows what he's doing, and he knows how to lead a football team. But to go, usually when you go in interim, you're just taking, your special teams guy, the quarterback's coach, whatever. You're just taking one of the guys from the staff who's been there. It's halfway through the season. They know the guys, and you just put him as the interim, and you kind of ride the season out, and he either stays or you obviously just go through a full search and then you make your decision. But they went straight to Saturday, so it seems that it was planned because you wouldn't just hire him out of nowhere. So it seems like he kind of knew what was going on, and they had conversations before about if something were to happen, we'd want you to be the interim here. And if the fact that they did go to get him as the interim, that most likely means that unless he's just terrible the rest of the season, not in terms of the record, but I would say in terms of his on-field decision making, which was one of the reasons that Irsay wanted to get him, was that he hasn't coached the NFL, so he's not afraid to make decisions. He doesn't just go to the analytics. He just does what's on his mind. So we'll see if that works, if it doesn't. But if he's just awful in that sense, like a Nathaniel Hackett is, where he needs to hire people to help him make decisions on the field in the second game of his NFL season, then maybe he won't be the head coach. But you would assume as long as he does okay and at least shows that he has potential as an NFL head coach, he's going to be the coach next year and the year after that. So it was definitely curious, though, when you heard the news, because they have Gus Bradley on that staff. He's obviously been a head coach before. You were probably just assuming that he would take over for that and then just lead them the rest of the season. But they go Jeff Saturday. So he's coaching this week against the Raiders. He got hired on Monday, and it wasn't really even announced till Tuesday. So he doesn't even have a full week. He's just now meeting the team. Obviously, he's been around the building and everything like that, but you don't know the guys. You're not in the locker room. You're not talking to these guys individually. The coaching staff as well. Do they even respect him as a coach, to be honest? I mean, yeah, they respect him as a player. He's a Hall of Famer, but do they respect him as the coach and a leader who can kind of take this team, who definitely has talent on them? Injuries have hurt them, and just inconsistent play have kind of faltered their season to this point, but they still have a shot in that division. I mean, I don't think they would win it, but you still have a shot nonetheless because the division's not great, so if you do get on a streak, you possibly could win it. I don't think they can because they just can't do it. They already lost to Tennessee twice, so it doesn't help, but you never know what could happen. But yeah, that was the biggest news out of this week, in terms of the coaching vacancies, I guess. And yeah, it's, and I think one of the other things, people were saying for this, you have to go through the Rooney Rule for this. For interims, you don't have to. If it was, the off season and they fired their coach and they want to go hire a new one, then the Rooney Rule would play effect. But for interim tag, it doesn't. And I don't know if, by the time the season ends, then they'd have to do a Rooney Rule, coach search, and it may still end up being Saturday. And that may have already been predetermined, but they still would have to go through the process of it. But for the interim, you could hire whoever you wanted to. It doesn't matter. You could hire anyone you want to. So that was just maybe some confusion, some conversation on social media and Twitter about that, but that is the rule for that. But yes, so that was my first pick. I was also talking about, the Colts coaching, firing and hiring of Jeff Saturday. But yeah, so that was the first pick. Second pick, we had Chargers at Falcons. It was -3. Chargers win 20-17 on a last second field goal actually. This one I was expecting, and I knew the Chargers had a lot of injuries in this. There was no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. They're missing guys on defense already with, Bosa being out, and Slater's been out also. He's out for the year. But it just seemed like a game, and the Falcons have been playing pretty well. They've been really competitive so far this season. They're at home, which they kind of seem to play a little bit better at home, to be honest. They beat the Niners, beat the Panthers last week. So I thought it was going to be a tough game, no doubt, and it was. I mean, it was ugly early. It was 10-0 early, but then they get 2 straight touchdowns. Eckler's having a monster season so far in terms of touchdowns. I think he's on pace for like 21 touchdowns this season. So then they make it 14-10, and then they get 2 field goals in the fourth quarter to eventually win the game. It sucks that it was, they won by 3. If you could win by 4, then, this week, I'm not going to say what my record is till the end of the season, to the end of the 5 picks that I say, but definitely could have been better. But it was definitely still a good week. I won't say the record yet, but it sucks that it couldn't have been more than 3. Again, they're more talented than them, even with the injuries. They still are. Herbert, I give him credit for this game. He hasn't been great so far this season, but again, Keenan Allen's played in like 1.5 games. Mike Williams is now out. The offensive line's been terrible for him, so it's definitely hard to put a lot of the blame on him. And this game, he was still pretty solid, so he's definitely having a year where he's still a top quarterback in the league. I don't think there's no doubt about that. The people who do doubt that, I think, are just people who aren't pro Herbert. So I think that's the reason why you may see stuff like that. But for the people and the weapons who are around him right now on this team, as it's currently made up on this roster, I give him a lot of credit for what he's doing and his performances. I mean, the fact they're 5-3 right now with everything that's going on with their coaching staff making, these 4th down decisions, costing them games potentially, and all the injuries that they have, and the defense cannot stop the run. I give him credit for what Herbert's doing this season. But yeah, so that was obviously a push, so that's a tie. So it sucked, but it's at the same time it was a last second field goal. So what can I really say? It's not like they were up the entire time, and then the Falcons got a late touchdown to make it 3 points. But third game, Seahawks at Cardinals. Again, this one I picked Seahawks plus 1.5. I couldn't understand why the Cardinals were favored. And I know they're at home, I get it, but the Cardinals are not better than the Seahawks, which is, I think, sad to say if you're a Cardinal fan, considering the fact that you just paid your quarterback all this guaranteed money in the offseason, and you think you have this team that can make the playoffs, and they've been hot starts the last couple of years, and they always fall in the end. But in Seattle, they're basically like trying to tank this season, and they're 6-3 right now. So I think it's pretty embarrassing if you're a Cardinals fan, a member of that organization, a part of that coaching staff, the GM Steve Keim or the owner. So and this, I mean, at home, they can't win at home, the Cardinals, so that also factored into my decision. The Seahawks win 31-21. It was close. It was definitely back and forth. The second half was a really good second half with just touchdowns back and forth. The Arizona did take a 14-10 lead off a pick 6, actually. But then the Seahawks answered with a touchdown. Seahawks get another touchdown to make it 24-14. Cardinals go right down the field, though, and get a touchdown. But then the Seahawks ice it with another touchdown from Kenneth Walker, who 7 touchdowns his last 5 games. He's probably on his way to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's been a monster for them. And even Tariq Woolen, their corner, who probably would be Defensive Rookie of the Year if it wasn't for Sauce Gardner, he's been great for them as well. So they've hit in their draft. That's what they do. The reason that they had Super Bowl capable teams and Super Bowl winning teams in the past was because of their draft. It wasn't because of free agency. It wasn't anything like that. They drafted Russell Wilson, they drafted Sherman, they drafted Chancellor, they drafted Earl Thomas. Like, they drafted all these guys. Every single guy you can think of from those teams, they drafted them. So that's the reason why they were so great. And they have a good track record of hitting on guys in the draft. And none of these guys weren't first-round picks. Kenneth Walker wasn't a first-round pick. Tariq Woolen wasn't a first-round pick. So that's just what Seattle does. And that's how you really build your team. If you have rookies who can play like that, and then even other guys who can just plug in as rotational guys or even middling starters, that's what makes up a good football team. And obviously you need a quarterback to play like that. Geno, I've said it, he's been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this season, and it was another good game from him. 275 through the air, 2 touchdowns. I think he had like at least like 60 yards on the ground, 40 yards. It looked like 60 because there was a couple carries where he was just going for like 15, 20 yards. But yeah, that was an easy pick for me. I felt confident in that one, and it hit. So that was another win. Fourth game, Titans-Chiefs. Now, I talked about this one when I made the pick. I said I wasn't sure if Tannehill was going to play. They were keeping it secret. I'm not really sure why. It didn't seem like it needed to be that much of a secret, but they wanted to keep it secret all the way until kickoff. And it was pretty clear. I mean, it seemed clear that Tannehill wasn't going to play, but in pregame warmups, he was throwing it, but he literally couldn't move. He was just standing still throwing the ball for like 10, 15 minutes. So it was pretty clear that Malik Willis was going to play this game. And I said, the line was 11.5, and I said if Willis plays, it's definitely going to jump up, which it did. I think it was 13.5 by the time game started. And I wouldn't have felt as confident about the pick because they don't throw the ball at Willis. He threw the ball like 10 times the week before against the Texans. Even in this game, he threw it 16 times. He only completed 5 of them. They were some pretty big completions, like 2 of them, but it's just if you can't throw, literally cannot throw the ball, it's going to be hard for you to move the ball offensively. But they were able to put up 17 points. You could argue they probably should have won this game, but yeah, the running game just carried. Henry had a monster game. Willis was pretty good on the ground too. He had 40 yards on the ground, but he had some key runs. He had a 17-yard run that was pretty nice. But yeah, Henry carried them. He had 115 on the ground, 2 touchdowns. He had a 56-yard run. And the defense played great. You got to give credit to that defense. They sacked Mahomes 4 times. They picked him off. They played a great game. They just couldn't get enough stops towards the end because the offense just couldn't move the ball. In the second half, like the first half, the offense was at least moving the ball. Henry had his big run in the first half. The first play of the game, they get like a 48-yard pass to their tight end on just like a simple screen pass. And they were able to move the ball. But the second half, they couldn't do anything. They literally couldn't move the ball. They didn't score in the second half, which is why Kansas City came back and did eventually win the game. But it was only 20-17, so that's why I covered. That's why I get the win for that game. I didn't expect it to play out like that, especially with Willis playing. I thought, come on. Mahomes, they drove right down the field. The score was 9-0 to start the game, and I was like, okay. But they, but it actually did end up, the Chiefs kind of slowed down the Titans defense. And this was, I was talking about earlier, like one of the teams that just plays really well. It was this game. The Titans just play well against the Chiefs. It's just, it's a matchup you wouldn't think because the Titans run the ball. The defense is good, but it's not like amazing. But for some reason, they just have the Chiefs number. And, they destroyed them last year. I think it was 38-3. Whatever it was, the Chiefs only scored 3 points. And they got blown out. The Titans, I think, have won like 3 straight games against the Chiefs going into this game. So they just kind of have their number. There's some teams like that for certain teams in the NFL. Like when the Patriots had their teams, it was like the Dolphins in Miami, especially because you couldn't really beat them in Miami. But there's just certain teams you just like kind of can't beat, and they're not as talented as you. They're not as good as you. They don't really match up that well to you. They may do one thing well, but you do way more things better than them. But for some reason, it's always close games. You don't score as many points as you usually do. Just certain things aren't working. So that was the case in this one, but the talent of Mahomes and the talent of the Chiefs just carried them through, and they lasted. The defense held up enough to not let up any more points for the offense to get a chance, because there was a time where the Chiefs offense couldn't move the ball, but eventually, like I said, they did end up winning this game. So that was another win, though, for me. And then fifth and final game, Ravens at Saints. -2.5 Baltimore. This one was so easy. I looked at this one. It was an easy pick, to be honest. The Ravens, even despite not having a lot of guys, Andrews didn't play in this one. They were missing a lot of guys, but I said it was going to be like a really good Lamar game. It wasn't like an amazing game. He had 82 yards on the ground, but only 133 through the air, 1 touchdown, but no turnovers. I think that's the big thing. He did fumble, but he recovered it. He didn't lose it. So I think that was the big thing for him, is that he didn't turn the ball over, because when they lose games, it's because he's turning it over. And as long as he can keep control of the ball, they're going to win a lot more games, because the defense now with Roquan Smith, now you have another guy in that linebacker core, and I wasn't sure how he'd play in this game. He had a couple big hits in this one. Their defense played great, but he definitely showed out a little bit with some big hits on Kamara, and I think it was their backup running back as well. But uh, you know, that's going to be a big add for them. And the way that, Justin Houston had 2.5 sacks, Marlon Humphrey had a sack coming off the edge, Calais Campbell had half a sack. So they just played a really good game in this one. Some older guys like Campbell and Houston played well. And obviously you got some younger guys who are still coming back. And they're still getting guys back. Tyus Bowser's going to come back. Ojabo is going to come back at some point. So, they're getting guys back, and I think that's going to help for the playoffs. And right now they're 6-3. I still see them winning that division over Cincinnati. So, as long as they win that division and don't have to play, and get a lesser opponent in the wild card round, and we'll see who they actually do match up with. But by the time the playoffs start in those last couple of weeks of the regular season, you'll see those guys coming back. They'll really start making an impact on that defense. And the defense, which hasn't been great so far this season, will be a lot better. And then the offense, as they get more guys back, they're going to start to get better as well. So this one was 27-13. It was an easy pick for me. So like I said, that was another win. And on the week, I went 4-0-1. And the one tie was obviously the Chargers game. So it was very close to a 5-0, but I will definitely take a 4-0 week basically. So that puts me at 20-22-3. Huge week to get back. I said we needed it, and we definitely got it. So definitely excited about that. Now next week we got to go 3-2. Go 3-2, then we're 500. That's all I want to do. We go 3-2 at the minimum next week, and we're good. Because the week after that, or I guess in two, there's this week coming up. There's week 10. There's week 11, but week 12 is going to be Thanksgiving. I'm going to pick all 3 Thanksgiving games, so sometimes that hurts, sometimes it helps, you don't know, but when you're picking 3 games just Thanksgiving, you don't know how it's going to go. So we definitely need these next 2 weeks to kind of build up, at least get 500 going to that Thanksgiving week so we can see where we are, but definitely a really good week so far, or in week 9. But some other games I just wanted to talk about just quickly, and these were, just kind of what I was talking about earlier with some teams where we kind of know what they are right now, and we've known it for a couple weeks, but now we really know. That's the Packers. They lost to the Lions 15-9. An atrocious game for them, to be honest. Rodgers has 3 interceptions, at the goal line. I mean, in the red zone, but at the goal line, he had 3 interceptions. Inexcusable, to be honest. They had a couple more injuries in this game. Rashawn Gary's out for the season. Aaron Jones hurt his ankle. It looks like he could still play through it, but he hurt his ankle. I think Romeo Doubs got injured as well. Christian Watson got injured. I mean, a team that's already depleted, not playing great. They've lost now 5 straight games. They just got even more injuries to their team. So they play Dallas next week. I mean, they're home, but that's unless something really comes to fruition in this week from Sunday to Sunday, they could be looking at being 3-7 at the end of this week. So it's not looking good for them, and it's just an embarrassing loss, to be honest. I mean, even still 15-9, you still had a chance to win the game, and they still couldn't pull through. So they on 4th down, they're in the red zone, they turned it over on downs. So just embarrassing from them. They're awful. They're not a good team. They're not making the playoffs. 3-6. I don't care what they do. They have no offensive weapons. They can only run the ball, and even then sometimes they can't. Defensively, they have a couple guys on the team who can make plays, but now with Gary out, that loses probably your best pass rusher. With the guys that you lost to Darius Smith in the offseason, so he was probably your best pass rusher left, and now he's out for the season. So they're a wash to me. They're done. They're on. If you have a list, you're checking them off for making the playoffs. They're not making the playoffs. So that was one. One game, but 2 teams, and despite one of the teams winning, I think we still know where they stand. I think their division just helps, but that's the Bucs. They're 4-5, and at 4-5, they're winning their division, which is sad. That's really sad, to be honest. But does anyone see them as a threat? Are they any somewhat competitive at all for a potential NFC Championship berth? No way. This team has no offensive weapons. They have the worst rushing attack in NFL history by 7 yards, I think it was. They average 61 yards a game. I think the one before that was 68 yards per game. So they're even worse, and I think that was in the 40s where they only ran the ball. So that's embarrassing. Throwing the ball, I think Brady still has it. The offensive line is just so many injuries, inconsistent play. The wide receivers have been injured as well. They haven't, Godwin's still not fully back. Julio, he can retire after this year. I don't think anyone would care. Mike Evans, he's been inconsistent this season as well. So, they just have a lot of problems defensively. They lose Shaq Barrett to an Achilles tear last week, so he's out for the season, obviously. So that hurts your defense even more. You need more guys to step up for them now. Devin White's got to play better. Levante David's kind of taking a step back as well. So even though they won this game, and the fact that they won this game, so if you watch this game, which I don't even know how you watch this game, it was that bad, but score is 13-6 going to the fourth quarter. I mean, the Bucs cannot move the ball. They cannot move the ball at all. And somehow they get a field goal with 8 minutes left, and then on the last drive of the game, they go 60 yards in like a minute. They couldn't do that for the first 3 quarters. They couldn't go 60 yards, basically. And then the last minute of the game, they go 60 yards and get a touchdown with 9 seconds left. But they did win. Hey, they're winning their division. Despite what I said, it's embarrassing. It's sad that a team like this could be winning a division in the NFL, but it's true. But yeah, I mean they'd be the 4 seed right now in the NFC, which is crazy. But the Rams, they're 3-5. I mean, like I said, the fact that the Bucs won this game is amazing. The fact that the Rams lost this game is just devastating. I mean, again, up 13-6. The offense didn't look good either, but at least they had a 70-yard touchdown to Cooper Kupp. Other than that, they really didn't do anything. Stafford had 165 passing yards in this game, and 127 went to Cooper Kupp. I think that's really the problem, is that they don't have a second receiver. And look, they can't run the ball, and they have no offensive line. So he doesn't have a lot of time to get the ball out. And if you can't run the ball, teams are just gonna lay back on you. You could run it with 6 in the box. I mean, they don't care. They're not gonna. What are you gonna do? You can't run against us anyway. So they're just gonna put people back. They don't care. But the problem is that no number 2 receiver. Last year when it was Kupp and then Woods, and when Woods gets injured, they get Odell. That's what you need. You need a second guy on this team, because if Kupp is, 127 out of 165, the ball's only going to him. That's all Stafford looks to. He just looks to give it to Kupp every single time. And look, it works a lot of the time, probably 90+% of the time. But with just the offensive line not being healthy and not playing great, and the lack of a run game, and the defense, I know you could say they played well in this game, but I'd really just look at the Tampa offense and say that that's just not a good offense. They average like 16 points a game, so I don't think they really did anything. I guess they held them to their average, but I think the Bucs, that's just like their ceiling, to be honest. The defense hasn't played well. There's no doubt about it. So this team is flawed. Division, no chance. I mean, they're 3-5. Seahawks are 6-3, and the Niners are 4-4, and the Niners have beat the Rams twice. So they have no shot at the division. Do they have a chance at a wild card spot? I guess potentially, but can you really see this team turning it around? I mean, Matt Stafford, again, this is Wednesday. He just got put into concussion protocol, so he might not even play this week now. I don't know. So that happened today. So I don't know if that was from Sunday and they just now put him in, or if that happened today. I don't know what happened. I just saw the tweet maybe like 20 minutes ago. So that's if he doesn't play this week and in a game in which they play the Cardinals, I mean, they may have lost a game anyways. That's 2 really bad teams playing each other. But if Stafford's not playing, I mean, they'd probably lose that game, again. So they'd be 3-6 at that point. You just write them off. I'm writing them off. They're not even in my picture of what the NFC playoffs looks like. They're not even in it. So, and it's sad that I have to keep the Bucs in it because of that division, but they are in it. But those are the games I wanted to talk about. And the one injury I did want, I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's Josh Allen. So the Bills, they do lose to the Jets this week. Definitely a bad loss. It's not like it matters for the Bills that much. I think they'll still be the number 1 seed, but at the same time, with Josh Allen being injured, and his injury is a UCL injury, which you see for like pitchers in the MLB, they'll have a UCL injury. But for him, and you could see the play that happened on it. I was watching this game, but he went back to pass, and as he's coming through, defensive lineman hits his arm, and just kind of just like snaps it back. I'll try to get it in the frame. Just kind of like snaps it back like that. They said it's more just like a sprain of his elbow and stuff. It's not like he didn't tear anything, he didn't break anything, nothing like that. But at the same time, you definitely have to be cautious with him. You could see for the rest of that game, and it happened pretty late in the game, but he just wasn't the same. He didn't really have the same power on his arm. He didn't look comfortable throwing the ball. He hasn't practiced this week yet, so it's good news that it's not something more serious where he needs surgery. It could be a month, it could be 2 months. It seems more kind of like a day-to-day to week-to-week basis. I would assume he misses this week. Maybe he does play, maybe he doesn't. We'll have to see what it looks like. I don't think he practiced today, so we'll see if he practices Thursday or Friday. But I'd be surprised if he played. And they have a tough matchup. They play Minnesota, who's obviously they're 7-1. They won again this week. They beat Washington. So it's a game where you definitely like to have him because Case Keenum's their backup. He's a solid backup, but with a backup coming in, and I know it's a really good team, Buffalo, but you got to be able to run the ball, and they just really don't have the guys to do that. So we'll see, but again, nothing's been confirmed yet about him playing or not. So we'll have to see, but personally, I wouldn't let him play this week. I think you rest, give him a week, and then come back the week after that. That's what I would do. But we'll see what they want to do. If he's good enough to throw the ball, he definitely. If he is, they're not throwing it like 50 times. He can't. I mean, there's no way. But we'll see. By the time the next video comes out, which will be the preview to Week 10, maybe we'll have more news at that point. Hopefully, that will more news will come out tomorrow, Thursday, then maybe even Friday morning. But it's probably a game time decision as to if he is going to play, but just in terms of practice and reports and diagnoses and everything like that. Hopefully there's some news about that for the next episode. But yeah, that's the one big injury. It could have been a lot worse, but even still, it could maybe be something that if it happens again, it could hinder him more. It could hinder his arm for the next couple weeks. They lose that number 1 spot. Who knows? But that was the big news, I guess, in terms of a player injury this week. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Definitely talked about a lot. The 5 picks, the coaching change in Indy, the Josh Allen injury, some teams we can kind of check off, at least personally. Yeah, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Definitely check out the preview video to Week 10, which I said will be out in a couple days. Yeah, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.